What's up, everybody? Alright, so I dropped a little hint the other day about going to Dallas and could I be possibly interviewing a Barrow? Well, yes, I am. I am interviewing Buddy Barrow, and he is the nephew of Clyde Barrow, and he is the family historian, so to speak. He has been interviewed on several TV shows. He has been a guest speaker at several events, one of which he will be with Bonnie Parker's niece. I believe it's in October or November in Atlanta, as a matter of fact. Now, Bonnie's niece her name is Bonnie Ray Parker. Yes, she was named after her aunt, and she is the historical custodian, I guess you would say, of the Parker family. So hopefully I will get to meet both of them in Atlanta and be able to do the same thing with her that I'm doing with Buddy this weekend. Right now I'm out on the highway headed towards Texarkana. I'm just outside of Texarkana heading towards Dallas, and I just wanted to drop you a line and let you know what I'm doing, and hopefully you'll enjoy this interview.
The 1920s were a hard time in America. The Depression started before the fall of Wall Street. Americans all across the U.S. were falling on hard times from coast to coast. None were affected more than the Midwest farmers. Banks were foreclosing on farms all across the plains. When the farms would be foreclosed on, this not only affected the landowner, but the sharecroppers alike. Farms were being left to themselves as farmers would migrate to city centers in hopes of putting food on the table and a roof over the heads of their family. Upon arriving in cities, they would find that there was no hope there either, and more times than not be relegated to homeless camps on the outskirts of town. The family of Henry Barrow found themselves in just this situation. Upon arriving in Dallas, the Barrow family had to live here in what was known then as the campground. Sharing a wagon as their roof, the family pulled together and were finally able to put together a one-room shack, add a mechanic's garage, and build a gas station with a one-room home. It's here that Clyde Barrow spent his formidable years before the saga of Bonnie and Clyde. He, his brothers, sisters, mother, and father. I had a chance to sit down with Clyde Barrow's nephew, Buddy Barrow, and have a conversation. This conversation was edited for time, but let me know in the comments below if you would like to see the whole thing. I'll be more than happy to post it. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, subscribe, like, and share. How I usually do this is, I don't know if Perry told you.
No, we didn't go anything.
We just sat down and had a conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's about the best way to do it. Number one, because, sure, I've got questions, but a lot of times during a conversation, just a regular conversation, more questions come up.
Oh, yeah, right.
And you actually get
There's
more
something always
information.
jogs my memory that I don't think about very much.
Absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate you meeting with me
Well,
today.
you're quite well.
Perry was like, "Oh, you're going to Dallas?" Because I had been chatting back and forth with him on Facebook, and I said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about it." He says, "Well, I got just a man for you to talk to." So I was like, "Well, hook me up with Mr. Buddy Barrow." Of course, this happened 84. The deaths happened 84 years ago.
Right.
And you're what, 70, 71?
71. I'll be 71 next month.
So of course you don't
Well,
remember
they'd
Clyde.
been dead 13 years before I came in the world.
Right. But you've heard, you
Oh,
don't
I've heard
remember Clyde, but you've heard family stories.
First-hand stories.
Yeah. And
People there, don't believe me, they didn't think this was glamorous at all.
oh, absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
it was hard. It was a heartbreaking deal for all of them to go through, and they wished they could have done something that, it was just like fate was going to have its way.
Hmm.
And nothing that he tried to do, nothing he really tried to do at it hard ever. I always say it's like a game show. Pick the right door, and you just never can.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's there. It's just opportunity, and fate just hasn't going to work that way.
Well, it's hard to, it is very hard for anything to be glamorous when you've got bullets in you, when you have been in a car wreck and you're burned, and you're having to live in the woods.
Well, not only that, they knew that death was going to come just any time, and they had Clyde had no desire whatsoever to go back,
Right.
as he called, to his hellhole.
Right.
Too many things had happened to him, and he wasn't going to let it happen again.
That was the turning point.
That's where he says there was no other human being going to do him that way again.
Right.
And his crimes was petty theft.
Joyride.
Back then, if you didn't have a car and you didn't have money for the gasoline, you might have had a car, but if you didn't have money for gasoline, what use was it?
Mhm.
And you had to have an automobile to get to your employment.
Right.
And another thing too, if you're a young man and you want to court some young lady, you got to have something that's going to make her.
Gotta have
realize
something
this guy-
about you.
Yeah, you had a car. That's
I used
it's
to,
just like a song that Patsy Cline come out. It was about she met this boy at the palace in Dallas, and she liked his hugging and she loved his kissing, but she loved his automobile.
I used to have a
Most
friend of
of all,
mine.
I loved his automobile.
I used to have a friend of mine down in Tipton, Georgia, named Glenn Holmes, and that man was in his 80s and still went to work every day dressed in a suit. And he told me one time, he was an investigator, private investigator, and he told me one time, he says, "Andy, if you don't ever take anything out of anything I've ever told you, make sure you dress the part, make sure you show up for work every day."
That's right.
And he said, "And show that you got something about you, son." And I took a lot to heart what that man had to say. We were talking about prison being the turning point for Clyde, because it was all petty stuff prior to that.
Yeah, he was there for, well, they had a botch. They called it the dumbbell bandits,
Hmm.
and that's where they got caught in Waco.
What was that?
It was a armed robbery of a filling station grocery store, and they called them dumbbell bandits because they got caught being ignorant, being dumb, and that's where Clyde has Bonnie to slip a pistol to him. Clyde doesn't take the pistol. He handed it to the guy that knew where the pistol was. And he was actually the one that broke out of Waco jail, or McAllen County. And so he was the one that had the weapon, and Clyde didn't have the weapon. But Bonnie right there and just put herself, participating in the crime.
Right.
But somehow she was they never realized how she was the one that brought the pistol in. And that's when her dedication to Clyde realized right then that this girl's, really likes
She's
him
dedicated
a lot.
to it. She's dedicated to it.
I always said he always thought she was pretty smart, sweet little cookie.
Okay, so there's Buck, who was born in
1903.
1903. Then 6 years later comes along Clyde.
Well, there was another girl born 1905. Aunt Nell was born in 1905.
Okay.
Then Clyde in 1909. My dad 1913. Marie born 1918.
And your dad is LC.
Elsie Bell. Right.
And
Matter of fact, all his family used to tell him he was marked at birth because he was born on Friday the 13th, 1913.
oh wow. Yeah, I would agree with him. I would agree with him. Were all the kids born in the same area?
No. Jack and Artie were born in Nacogdoches County, and Clyde and Buck was born in Grays Prairie, which is still part of East Texas, and then Aunt Artie was born in I can't think of the little town, but it's all right there, right after Aunt Artie was buried. They were already sharecropping. They were moving around a lot when they started doing the farming. And then Henry, my grandfather, bought a farm there in Ellis County, and they set up there. This is where Clyde and my dad are born, in Ellis County. And then when Marie's born in 1918, this is where they're heading toward Dallas now, and she's born in Kearns, Texas, which is down there by Cedar Creek Lake. And then after that, they're in Dallas by 1920.
Okay. So in 1920, they're in Dallas, and they're...
See, the stock market fell, but the Depression had hit long before the stock market fell.
Right.
All these people were already started losing their farms, they were losing everything they had. And Papa lost everything that he actually had. All he had was what little clothing they had and what furniture they had. And so 3 of the children, Jack, Artie, Buck, and Aunt Nell, were already in. The girls had left. They were all married before they were 14.
Oh, wow.
So they wanted out of that. They thought getting married, would get them away from the drudgery of that farm life.
Right.
Because they hated picking cotton.
Right.
Those girls said it tore their hands up so bad,
Well, so did Pretty Boy Floyd.
Yeah, and it just, it wasn't their cup of cake.
Yeah.
So anyway, all the 4 children had already moved to Dallas, and they were sitting pretty good. And they told Papa and Cumie that if they come to Dallas, they'd help them, establish themselves or something. Well, when my dad, Marie, and Papa and Cumie came to Dallas, well, they stayed under the Houston Street Viaduct first, and then they moved all these squatters or destitute people under the Trinity River bottoms that went into West Dallas. And then the city of Dallas wanted all these destitute people. They wanted them out of Dallas City. So they put them over in an unpopulated area, a destitute place out there called a campground. It's where they moved all these people out there. Well, there was no water, there was no electricity, there was no sanitation, there was no work, there was nothing.
Right.
And these people were doing whatever they could do to put food in their children's mouth.
Right.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd hate to think I lived back in that time, because I wouldn't want, if something's going to happen, because I'm not going to let my child starve to death.
Right.
Somebody's going to lose something.
Right.
And that's how these people thought. And it wasn't usually the adults. My grandfather became he would go to these construction sites, and they would pay him to move this old lumber, scrap pieces, and clear the deal off.
Right.
But when he
Basically what they call a laborer.
well, yeah, they got a name for it. But anyway, he had that wagon and that mule, and he'd go take that stuff off and haul it off and clean up the construction sites, and they pay him for it. And he was, I guess, apparently working in downtown Dallas, and he was coming across the Commerce Street Bridge, and a car hit the wagon and killed his mule, and Papa got enough money to take his little house, because the two girls, Aunt Artie and Aunt Nell, had bought this two lots right there on Eagle Ford Road, which is now Singleton. And Papa took that little squatter house, little one-room shack that they were all living in. Most of the times they were living under that wagon.
Right.
And I'm talking about in the open elements. So you can imagine what it was to sleep and live in that kind of situation. So he picked that little house up and moved it over there on that lot. And Clyde comes about this time because he wants to help his dad. You know, he wanted to put a mechanic shop in there. Clyde did.
Right.
And Buck was already a mechanic, and Jack was already a mechanic. Jack had his own business, and Buck was working for him. And then Buck struck out and went on to bigger and better things, being a mechanic. And then Buck wound up getting a divorce, and he goes over the hill. You know, he's just distraught because he'd lost one of his children, died at birth, and marriage went to pots after that. So he got to messing with the guys, and he got like my grandfather was. He was going to these construction sites, cleaning off, just trying to make a buck. And apparently there was some kind of this directing, whatever. There was a load of copper out there, and Jack thought that it was stowaway. So he loaded it up and sold it. And we'll come to find out they filed theft charges on him. This is where he
started down the road.
Getting in. And then, before you know it, he's fighting chickens, and he done run out of chickens, so he starts stealing them. And then he run across a big old load of turkeys, and it's Thanksgiving, Christmas time, and he gets his little brother going with him, and they get caught stealing his damn turkeys.
That would be Clyde.
That would be Clyde. And then after that, it became, well, we don't have an automobile, so, you know.
Here comes Clyde.
Here comes Clyde, here comes Buck, they're doing the same thing. I asked my dad one time, I said, how many cars did you steal? He said, I never stole a car in my life. He said, well, quite a few of them. I said, oh, is that what you call it?
Well, like I was talking to Perry a couple of weeks ago.
And if you run out of gas, he says, hell, just because it came in don't mean I have to leave in it.
Exactly. And he was like, Clyde never really stole the cars to sell them or anything like that. He stole them to get from point A to point B.
I'll be right, yeah.
And
I
had never thought about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's less maintenance.
Yeah.
You got a flat tire. Why you want to change the flat tire? Just go get one. It's got a good tire. Yeah, and it's got a tank full of gas.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, normally when they stole the car, that's the first thing they looked to see how much gas was in it. Yeah. Who wants to steal a car? It's just going to get you a couple of blocks. Matter of fact, that did happen. Clyde had Debbie D go steal his car, and it had just enough gas to get a couple of blocks, and it run out of gas. And Clyde told him, he said, "Well, you sure can pick them."
Okay, so they have moved the little shanty house over onto the lot on Singleton, which is where I went last night.
Right.
So I take it that the gas station portion of it was an add-on?
Yeah, that came a little bit later. When Papa had, like I said, he got a settlement through the insurance company on his horse and his wagon and stuff, and that gave him enough money to move that little shack over there, and he'd give him enough money to add on to and make a filling station out of it.
Right.
So that's how he did that. And the whole thing of this, Clyde was going to help him at the filling station. Well, my dad and Clyde was still in school. They were still, They're 14, 15 years old, and they're in the 8th, 9th grade, or 6th grade, whatever it was back then. I think they were in the 6th grade, because Clyde quit in the 6th, and I think my dad quit in the 5th. And they're already teenagers now. Apparently, they didn't start school until late, and they're already up in age by the time they're in 5th, 6th grade, because I think we were probably, what, 10 or 12 maybe in 6th grade?
Oh, yeah.
So they're a little bit older, and they're skipping school to go fishing and hunting, stuff like that.
I can't say I haven't done it.
Yeah, and Kimmy got tired. She said, if y'all gonna quit going to school, just grow up and be idiots, you know? There's nothing I can do. And before they were doing that, my dad was the only Bear child that had a bicycle. Marie told me a story that she caught Clyde, my dad, skipping school. She said, I'm gonna tell Mama if you don't let me have your bicycle. So they had to give her the bicycle.
It was the first bicycle she ever had, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I saw an interview with her, and she said,
Yeah.
I don't know where he got it,
They gave my first.
but he gave me my first bicycle.
Yeah. Yeah, because I imagine he did that because he held my dad's bicycle ransom.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how brothers and sisters will do that to each other?
Right. Well, see, there's another story that my dad told me about Marie when she got where she was a teenager. She liked to, and of course back then, if a woman wore makeup, there were, what do you call it, women of the street, and Kimmy wouldn't let her girls ever wear makeup or look floozy or anything like that. And Marie had stuck off with one of her girlfriends, and my dad caught her, and she had makeup on and all that stuff. And she said that my dad grabbed her around the neck, hauled her, found a filling station, put her in there and washed her face and everything else. She says, Mama killed you. She ever saw you like that. Don't you let me catch you with that like that more. You know, I'll tell Mama.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, big badass, see.
Can you really call them big badass when everybody's under 5'5"? Yeah. It's those stories, and it's those relationships as kids growing up and everything. They shine a separate light because everybody knows what the different versions of the whole Bonnie and Clyde saga is. Depending on who you're talking to as to kind of what the saga is.
Because he had ears that stuck out way out past his ears. And Clyde always told my dad he looked like a taxi cab coming down the street, both doors open. And they arrested him on a charge of burglary because they
saw somebody with ears.
They identified my dad as the perpetrator because his ears stuck out. And he didn't even have anything to do with the robbery.
Was he able to prove it?
Well, he served 5 years for the armed robbery he didn't do. When he got out of prison, the two officers who knew he did not do that, Bob Alcorn and Ted Henry, saw my dad at another location when that robbery took place, but they did not come to my dad's aid. After he served his 5 years, I got a deal right there in that paper.
Those are two names that keep coming up, don't they?
Yeah. Well, the Bears had already established themselves, and they wanted them out. They wanted them gone. So they framed Jack, they framed my dad, they framed all them boys. You know, they were blamed for a lot of things that there was, like I said, there was other criminals, all over West Dallas that time, because these people were desperate. And they were pulling the same kind of deals that Clyde and Buck did.
Yeah.
But here it was, Clyde and Buck had already gained a notoriety. So anything that happened, it was always them and nobody else.
Right.
Jack got a life prison, got a life sentence for killing the guy in a bar, which Jack was the bouncer in the bar. And this guy, Jack tried to stop the fight. The guys were being belligerent and harassing the women, and Jack told them to leave. Well, one of the guys picked up a big beer pitcher and smacked Jack across the face, split his face wide open. and the fights ensued, and they were getting the best of Jack. And my dad happened to be there, and I don't know the real truth at it, but Jack shot the guy and killed him. To me, that's self-defense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he was a barrel,
Yeah.
and he got a life sentence. And I've heard stories that Jack may not have been the one who shot the guy, since it was my dad's pistol.
I've heard the same story. I've heard the same story.
And my dad wouldn't
That.
he wouldn't elaborate. And I think Jack went to prison for my dad because my dad was the last little brother.
Yeah. That's the story I heard.
But my dad wouldn't. I asked him, he wouldn't comment.
Yeah. And they
It was
take
my-
and they
it
take
was
these
my dad-
things,
it was
and
my
they take
dad's
these things
pistol,
to their
and-
grave, you know.
It was my dad's pistol. It was my dad who hid the pistol.
Right.
He went and hid it behind the toilet. Back then they had these bowls sitting up on the wall.
Right.
And he hid it behind there, and they found it.
Did they?
So Jack didn't have a pistol, but
Right.
my dad did. I don't
What you
know.
gonna do when your brother's getting you? You know.
Well, Jack, you know, he hadn't been in no serious. He borrowed a car when he was.
Yeah.
You know, he got in trouble. He got arrested for car theft. Of course, he didn't get no jail time or anything like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was the only minor trouble. Jack had already had a family, and he was raising his family, doing good, and then all at once his marriage dissolved. And I don't know what it is about back then when those marriages ended like that. The guys just went, you know, went looking
Yeah.
other places and just in trouble.
And you know, now Marie's passed, right?
She passed in '99.
In '99.
That's you know, when I was growing up, this subject was something that no one ever went out in public and spoke about.
Right.
We kept away from the media. We kept away from you know, after that movie came out, where we were living, I bet you every day we had news media knocking on doors. The telephone was ringing off the wall. Where in the world they got the phone numbers, I don't know.
That's pretty easy to
But
get.
law enforcement started showing up, you know, and
Law enforcement did?
yes, I don't ask me why, but they started coming out and looking at all of us. And Blanche lived probably 2 blocks over. This is over in Sigerville, Texas, and we lived on this corner. And then Blanche lived over there. Marie didn't live over there, but there's 3-4 people of the Bear clan and the Parker clan were living in that area, and they harassed all of us. And finally, Billie Jean picked up and moved. Blanche moved. Marie moved. We all moved to Cedar Creek Lake, which is up in another 2 counties over. And 3 days later, we're getting a knock from the sheriff of
From there.
Henderson County, telling us that he knows we're in his vicinity. You know who we are. He knows who we are. And I go, my God, Jack, this is, you know, why is this happening? My dad, and back, I think it was about 1955, we were not in downtown Dallas, but we was over in South Dallas. And my dad, it was a 3-lane road. My dad was in the center and decided he wanted to make a right-hand turn. Well, he crossed lane and went ahead and made his turn. And an officer saw us. He pulled us over for making an improper turn. And my dad gave us his driver's license, and the officer comes back. He says, "Sir, I want you to step out of the car. I want you to put your hands on the hood and spread your legs." So he searched my dad. This police officer not saying a word. He turns my dad around. He says, "You're one of those badass Bear boys." This is 1955. Clyde and Bonnie had been dead a long time. My dad hadn't been in no trouble whatsoever. And the officer said, "Well, you're one of those badass Bear boys," and it didn't sit well with my dad.
Yeah.
He says, "Let me tell you something, son. You're too damn young to know it, and you're too damn, in other words, it's none of your GD business." The officer arrested him for verbal abuse.
Really?
We had to go to jail, had to go down to City Hall and bail him out. over bullshit like that. That was what I called uncalled for.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was no reason for it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that was the kind of stuff that was, you know, going on all those years later.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the movie came out, here it starts all over again.
Right.
So,
Well, the movie came out in what, 67,
yeah,
right?
it came out in '67. Well, he wound up getting 3 of them, and he got 2 years for the 3 DWIs. Bill Decker was the sheriff of Dallas County at the time, and so I took my dad up there when he was fixing to start serving his time, and my dad told Bill Decker, sheriff of Dallas County then, he says, if you send me to Easton to serve this 2 years, he said, they'll kill me down there. He said, because of what my brothers did.
Mm-hmm.
And Sheriff Decker told him, he says, well, he said, Elsie, you're a barber. He says, you'll be good right here. I'll have you giving the people here haircuts and shaving. He said, would you do that? He said, I'd love to do that. He said, just don't send me back to Easton.
Mm-hmm.
So Decker kept him in the county jail for 2 years.
Now, where is he?
Helped him out.
Where is he?
Who?
The prison.
The prison, it's down in, it's down in Huntsville, Texas, which is on the way to go into Houston,
Okay.
off of 45
Okay.
south. We went there, matter of fact, I went there not long ago and they gave me this hat for my uncle's service there.
Mm-hmm. For your uncle's service there?
They my dad's.
Okay.
We
Yeah, I
went
was
down
kind of
to
wondering
Warden.
where it was. You always hear about, you know, is there,
Perry near-
is
Perry
there
went with
two,
us.
is there 2 prisons down there? Or
Yeah,
is-
there's 3 units. 3
Okay.
units painted, but the main prison is, you know, downtown Huntsville.
Okay.
And there's
And that's the one that they call Huntsville?
that's the one they call Huntsville, yeah,
Okay.
where Clyde and them were with Easton,
Okay.
and which is it's a working farm. It's still a working farm, and the old prison's still there. And we went not long ago, and the warden gave us a tour of Easton.
Mm-hmm.
Perry and them went, you know, and so it that's where all their problems started right there, because they had I don't know if you ever watched that Shawshank Redemption,
Mm-hmm.
where this guy knows something about one of the prisoners,
Mm-hmm.
and the warden don't want him to know because he wants to keep him
Right.
in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw what they did to the guy to
Mhm.
shut him up.
Yeah.
Well, those guards, my dad told me, he says, when those guards walk up and tell you you're going to escape tonight,
Mm-hmm.
you draw your last breath.
Yeah.
And they did that.
Yeah. Well, that's why Clyde cut his toes off.
Right. Right. Yeah, but they did the same thing because they was beating Ralph Phillips unconscious. And one of the guards looked at Clyde because he was standing there, you know, with his clenched fist, according to Ralph Phillips. He says, and then one of the guards says, you want some of this, boy? Well, that's where Ralph Phillips, he said, this is where he saw Clyde change from a schoolboy to a rattlesnake.
Mm-hmm.
Because of all the treatment they did those boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason why a lot of them mutilated themselves to keep them.
Right. Just
Of course, that played havoc. He does it, and 2 weeks later, he's walking out of prison on parole.
on parole, yeah. Draw
Everybody's
the luck,
talking about the
right? There's that barrel of luck again, right? Just in case people don't understand what we're talking about the situation with the guards, they would get a reward above their paycheck for any prisoners that escaped that they brought in dead or alive. And 9 times out of 10, they were brought back dead.
Mm-hmm.
And the guards would get a one-time bump in pay for that, for like, what was it, $35, something like that? $25, $35. And you gotta remember, back then, you had people that were just as bad, if not worse, than the people that were serving time guarding them. So it was kind of like the fox guarding the hen house. So they would make their money, their extra money, by picking out a inmate and telling him he was going to be escaping the next day. And basically, they'd take them out in the fields when they were working, say they escaped, shoot them, and bring the body back and collect a reward for it.
Yeah, they had what they call high riders on those horseback. They were the ones that carried weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And if you gave any problem, you were killed attempting to escape.
Mm-hmm. And so that's what Clyde was trying to avoid by cutting his toes off. Was he had been told that he was going to be escaping the next day, and he was like, I don't want to go out to the field, so the best way to handle that is to cut the toes off. And like you said, it wasn't long after that they paroled him and sent him home, and so he probably wasn't even healed up yet from cutting his toes off.
No, he was still on crutches when he came back home. Yeah. As a matter of fact, that was the only time he actually stayed at the filling station, because right after that, when he got better, he looked Bonnie back up, and he moved in with his sister, Aunt Nell.
Mm-hmm.
And she got him several jobs, to establish himself back to normal life. And here comes the police,
Because they know he's out.
And he may not have been involved in it, but they knew exactly where he was, and they would pick him up, question him, see if he knew anything about these little incidents. And finally, his employers told him, we can't allow this here, we're going to have to let you go.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand, that every employee that Clyde worked for, after he returned from prison, said he was a hard worker, he was a dedicated employee, and just things just didn't, you had law completely harassing him. He said they would actually pick him up from jail, from his work, take him downtown Dallas, take him down there questioning. They wouldn't take him home. And he had to walk from the city jail or city courthouse and walk back to where he lived.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he'd get halfway home, 2 other detectives would pick him up and take him right back down there. This is the same day.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that these, I just got through answering these guys. He said, well, you're going to answer our question.
Mm-hmm.
So finally he says, enough's enough. He told his mom, he says, I'll see him, in another place.
Yeah.
And that's when he struck out.
So.
And see, that's the reason why Bonnie writes in her poem.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I knew Clyde when he was upright and straight. Those laws kept pulling around, taking him down. That's what she's telling you.
Yeah.
Because she witnessed it. That poem that she wrote tells you everything that went on in their lives, from the time to the very end.
Mm-hmm. After the deaths on May 23rd, that, of course, had a huge impact on the family.
Mm-hmm. Well, they all knew.
Both parents.
They all knew it was going to happen. It just, it just.
Well, that's the reason for the dual name headstone.
Right.
And
well, see, there's a vacant spot there between Clyde and Cumie.
Okay. Why's that?
Because that's where Bonnie was going to be laid.
And her mama.
My grandfather told Emma that, why don't we have one funeral and 2 grave spots.
Right.
2 at the funerals and the grave placing at the same time. And Emma said no, she had him, he had her death and she was going to have him alive.
Mm-hmm.
But there's maybe some things that's going to happen.
As in moving? As in moving?
Right. I can't say much, but
Yeah.
we're talking about it.
Well, good.
And
Good.
the Barrow family has no quarrel whatsoever over it. It's strictly up to the Parker family, and things change.
Bonnie Ray good with that?
Yeah, I can't say much. I don't want to let the hen out,
I can't see where she wouldn't be though.
there's, it's what she wanted, and you'd be surprised how many people out there, feel the same way. I said, why'd you let it do that? I said, we had no
No
quarrel
control
whatsoever. It's what she wanted, it's what he wanted, they wanted to be together to the end, and they were. And there's a funny thing. In 2001, we had the Texas State Fair. We had a Bonnie and Clyde exhibit in here. It's one of the biggest exhibits they've ever had at the State Fair. And there was a man who walked up to me. She said, "We just don't understand, you know, what the story is about Bonnie and Clyde." She said, "We know it's a love story." I said, "You know, it's a pretty dedicated love story." And I asked her, I said, "Let me ask you something, since you're asking this question." I said, "Would you die for him?" She looked at him, she said, "Sorry, Buster." I said, "I rest my case."
That got me off track.